The series finale for WandaVision just debuted. We've gotten all the answers we're going to get, and a few things have been teased for the future, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies, TV, and Marvel way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on episode 9 of WandaVision, as well as the series as a whole. As we go into this, let's keep it friendly and respectful. Last week, things got a little bit nasty in the comment section where people were attacking people rather than debating their arguments. It's fine to disagree. Let's do it in a manner that's friendly amongst people that have been enjoying a show. With that said, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to kick off with my thoughts on the episode as a whole. Then I'm going to talk about the season as a whole kind of briefly. And then I'm going to walk through all my thoughts about the episode and the specific things, theories, applications, all that fun stuff. One more thing before we get started. There is a companion video to this over on my Patreon page where I did a 25-minute review and discussion of the season as a whole, my thoughts on it, my experience with it, what did I think about the whole thing. 25 minutes long. Join at any level. You can unlock that video and so much more. The link is down below in the description. And let's get started with my general thoughts on the episode. And I felt it was a satisfying conclusion to the season that tied up the loose ends, had a lot of emotion, and then provided some spectacle and action that you want from an MCU finale. It was fun to see the whole family get in on the action, and you got a little bit of the philosophical side of Vision, as there were two Visions and they had to duke some things out. You had Wanda struggling through her identity, through Agatha and everything that was going along with her. So a lot of those kind of character things that you wanted. And then you do get plenty of slam bang action. They saved all of it for this one episode. And in the scheme of MCU action, we've seen a lot of it. And so that kind of sets an expectation, a bar for where you want things to be. And I don't know that this felt like it lived up to a lot of that. Compared to television, most other television, sure, it was cool to see two Visions duking it out and a guy running real fast. But it's not like there were moments in this fight where you're like, oh man, and then Vision did this, or oh man, then Wanda did that. Oh man, one of the twins, he did this. I mean, you had all the action crammed into one episode, and you can say the action happened, but there was nothing distinctly interesting about it. It's not like an action sequence or sequences that you want to go back and rewatch, and that's not normally a good sign. Action sequences are kind of designed to be pleasing to the eyes and do something specifically exciting, and this was just, two Visions punching each other, flying through buildings, Wanda throwing blasts, kids run real fast, swap a hat around or something like that. But there was nothing that was like iconic, cool MCU action moments. And that's just a little bit disappointing, that if you're going to save all your action for one episode, you really want to have something cool happen. And I don't feel like that's what happened here. The emotional stuff, the character moments, the resolution to how things have to play out, the revelations for what Wanda has to do for her future, I think that worked. And I think the other thing that kind of helped going into this episode versus the last 2 weeks is that I'd reset my expectations. So a big of the discussion where things kind of got nasty in last week in particular in the comment section is there's just a lot of people that when I said I was disappointed, they're like, oh, you're just another fan that let your imagination run wild. Oh, because you didn't get what you wanted. Your anger is like, that seems awfully dismissive. I said a lot more than that. I think that you're discrediting what I said in order to fit it into a pretty narrow narrative. The show itself was built around intrigue and the desire for what's kind of going on, what answers are coming, and the interviews they gave, in particular things Paul Bettany said, teased bigger things, more things. I mean, he said this is the more CGI is in this TV show than was in Endgame, that there's an incredible cameo that no one's guessed, and none of that was real. And the show itself, they chose to bring in a character from the X-Men universe as an Easter egg that isn't the audience, our imagination running wild when we go, wait, he's from the X-Men universe. They're about to do a movie called In the Multiverse of Madness. Wanda's going to be in it, and there's a big part of her character has X-Men ties. Whoa, what does this mean? That's not our imagination running wild. They fed that. They sparked that. They encouraged that. They did things. They did set up Quicksilver as a red herring. They did that. And so then to say that some of us were just letting our imagination run wild it's kind of a dishonest argument. There can be sides to that that's true, but to be fully dismissive of it's a valid criticism that they did things that set themselves up and set the audience up for disappointment. So once you get past the episode where you realize like, okay, they're not going in those directions that they teased, indicated, that's not really what this is. You can go into the finale and just know that it's probably going to play it a little bit more straightforward. It's going to have a lot of emotion as this universe is not sustainable that Wanda's created for herself. And so you got that here, the resolution with proper expectations. And, all week people are like, who do you think the big cameo is going to be? What are your big predictions for what's going to happen? I went in, like I didn't have anything like that anymore. I was like, it's going to be a big fight. That's about it. Like I thought there was the potential that maybe Doctor Strange would show up for the obvious reasons, and he was mentioned, but I wasn't even that. I wasn't really thinking it was going to happen. I thought it was possible, and that wouldn't be like Doctor Strange showed up. Wow, it would have been, yeah, Doctor Strange showed up. Witches, wizard makes sense. Okay, yeah, sorcerer. But it didn't happen. But I wasn't disappointed by that. So I think there's, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more, but they made some choices in the way they built the intrigue and the excitement and stuff that they led people on. And you can't blame someone for being led on if you lead them on. They did that. There's a side to it where people go too far with that. There's sides where people keep heading down that path, but they did things that led people on. In this episode, by this point in time, that's not what happened. So it's like, could just take it at face value. And so it worked on an emotional level, closed things out in a way that made sense, teased some things in the future while feeling like it resolved some things. Wish the action was a little bit more punch to it in general. So what are my thoughts on this season as a whole? This has been tough for me all along because the inherent nature of it is so different from the rest of the MCU. That MCU, because they're broad appeal blockbusters, all of them, lots of action, spectacle, and jokes. And that's just not what this was. And they knew that. And we knew going into it was so different. So it's in a universe where we know what we're supposed to expect, and it's a different thing. And on a plot level, we didn't know what was going on at all for 3 episodes. We're just in a sitcom with no context. And so that creates a scenario where you want to wait till the end to see what are answers are they going to give so I can know how to process what I get, what they gave me. And so we finally have that. And because I've been kind of critical of some things all along the ways, I think some people kind of latched onto that a little bit more than they assigned meaning to that I've never assigned meaning to. In real life, I've rewatched the first 3 episodes probably over 10 times, maybe 15, 20 times. My 2-year-old daughter loves those first 3 episodes and watched this on loop. And then the second half, the rest of the season, I've watched all of them except the last couple like 5 times. Like I've watched all of it a lot and had a ton of fun watching it, creating these videos, thinking about it. And the adventure of watching this show and the journey of speculating what it could be. I've had a blast with this show, and the week to week has created a scenario that I've really enjoyed it. Now, I think the week to week hurt it in that it created a scenario that because of the intrigue that they're trying to build, with a week of me running it through my mind and you running it through your mind, you inherently come to some answers that aren't correct. And that's one of the consequences of a show like this with so much hype anticipation, with a week between episodes where we just try and answer the questions that their show has posed. They created the scenario. And so it's kind of an interesting one of like half the fun of the show was the speculation, and then some of the disappointment of the show was the speculation. So I don't know if it was, maybe if they'd done 3 episode batches, and so there was speculation, but it was with a bit more context and not so much. I don't know. Maybe that could have helped some of that out to have the positive of having time to process it, but also without letting us go too wild. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. But one of the big thoughts, I think, coming out of on the other side of this, some people have been skeptical of my take on this show because I did a video back in December ranking the Marvel Disney Plus shows based off my excitement for them, and WandaVision was next to last on the list. And going into it, said that. That's like I don't know what to make of this because it is so different, because it is this sitcom show. I don't know what it is. I don't know the plot, so I don't know how to categorize it. And that's after we watched the first 3 episodes. I was still kind of like, I don't know how to categorize this. I don't know what to make of this. And I had Falcon and the Winter Soldier very high on that list. Like it was like number 2. So the one we just finished watching, the one we're about to get, we're almost polar opposites on this ranking. Here's my speculation as to try to, maybe this is the best way it can help you kind of understand my feelings on it. I suspect when push comes to shove, and we've seen both shows, I'll have liked WandaVision more than Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And that's not because my excitement for Falcon and the Winter Soldier has dropped. It's just not really that shift. And it's not because I was just totally bananas about WandaVision. It's that all along, Falcon and the Winter Soldier feels like the safe bet option to me. I could be totally wrong. It could turn to be something totally different. But like we know it's a continuation of Winter Soldier, Civil War. We know these characters. We know this genre. You can categorize what Falcon and the Winter Soldier is, and you go into it knowing pretty well what it is. And it's a very safe bet, because it's a spy show. Spy shows, people know how to do that. And that makes it kind of less interesting in a sense. But that, like, I was excited for it because I know what that is. I know how to categorize it. WandaVision, still don't even know how to categorize it. I've seen the whole thing. But that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it pop. That's what makes it, in the scheme of the MCU, like this thing that's unique. This weird sitcom, Twilight Zone type thing. So that's probably my best way to help you understand my thoughts and feelings on it. I've had some things I was frustrated with. The bait and switch that I mentioned, bringing a Fox X-Men character in and having it not mean anything, I think was a dishonest way to treat the audience. I think that there was some games they played that maybe they created expectations that kind of disappointed audience members, and I don't think that's just because the audience was letting their mind run wild. But they also did something unique and different inside the MCU. One of the big criticisms of the MCU, and it's a valid criticism, is that there's formulas to it. There's a certain sameness to it. And this broke from that and did something wildly different and new. And I love that. I love that we have this very bizarro thing inside of it, inside the MCU. That's cool. It's cool to have something like that. So that, I don't know if that helps you understand where I'm coming from. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And more so, I thoroughly enjoyed the journey of watching it. As confused as I was at the beginning, when we started getting that episode 4, and it took my 2 older kids until episode 4 to get into it, which is interesting because they don't like episode 4 at all. They like Wanda and Vision, but they needed the context, I guess, to get into it. And watching it with them, making these videos, talking with you has been a lot of fun for the most part. Last week it got weird in the comment section, but if you haven't noticed, the comment section was weird last week, as I mentioned a few too many times. But in general, I've just thoroughly enjoyed the adventure of watching all of it. And then the show itself, I just very much appreciate having this thing that's very different. Okay, from there, let's get into our walkthrough of the episode. And a lot happened here, but a lot of it isn't stuff that you really need to, there's not a lot to analyze on it in general. Few parts you can analyze, but not a ton of it. So it kicks off right off where last week left, where you have Wanda and Agatha outside. Agatha has the 2 kids, Wanda, and she's threatening them. Wants Wanda's powers. Wanda realizes now that they're outside, the runes aren't stopping her from using her powers. She's like, I can use my magic. So she throws it at Agatha, who we learned last week has absorption power. So she just absorbs it. And she's like, you can't hurt me. I just absorb things like this. And Agatha basically promises, hey, if you give me all your powers, I'll create a universe for you where you can have your family and keep doing your thing. And that's her big temptation the whole episode is like, I will let you have your own little universe. I'll let you have your own little universe. Just give me your powers. Wanda's not crazy about this plan, so she throws a car at her, crushes her, and you just see the two boots sticking out. I think it was supposed to be a Wizard of Oz little reference, at least visual reference to that. And so she takes her out, but then the body's not there. And like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Then White Vision flies up, and Wanda's intrigued. Vision, is that you? Just walking up to this character that we know. He is suspicious, and he walks up to her and just grabs her skull and starts trying to crush it, which she did not enjoy. And his mission is to destroy Wanda and destroy Vision. So as this is happening, fake Vision flies up. He took last week off, took him a whole episode to fly across town, I guess. Shows up just in time to tackle our White Vision, knocks him down the road. Wanda sees him there and just apologizes to him for everything. Like, apologize. I should have told you what was happening. And I think there's one thing that maybe in my kind of, maybe in the structure of the season, I wish they'd kind of balanced it out a little bit more, is that we did our episodes at the beginning, the first half of the season where they're together as a family. And then we get to the Halloween episode. And after the intro, they go separate ways for 4 episodes straight, 3 episodes straight, where he's on patrol while she's with her brother. And then he's kind of knocked out of the city and trying to travel back. And then he just wasn't in last week's episode. So you have this gap to where the hook of the show is the dynamic between the two of them, and they've been away for 3 episodes. And I think that was kind of lacking. What was some of my disappointment with the last 2 weeks' episodes is that key dynamic wasn't there, and that I enjoy about the show. But so Wanda apologizes for what she's done. Cut to fake Pietro has Monica locked in a room. And so just does a little bit of a catch up, just like, hey, remember, we're over here, and she's trying to get out, and he's using his super speed, won't let her out. Cut to the outside world, and we got Hayward is at his fort trying to figure out what he's going to do. Jimmy is walked up, he's in handcuffs, and Jimmy's like, you're not going to get away with this. They're going to catch you for everything that you've been doing. Hayward's like, what are you talking about? You've been arrested. And Jimmy's like, the FBI will be here in a month, and they will, or in an hour. Month would be too late. In an hour, and they're going to see what you're doing. And we see him grab a phone behind his back. They don't see it, and then they take him, put him in a room where he's by himself, so he can use the phone that he snuck into his hand. So, or he undoes his cuffs, escapes, and so he uses the phone. And he's got all these trill. And I'm not saying my words right today. He has all these tricks that he didn't seem to have before. He can do magic tricks, he can undo handcuffs, and he calls the FBI for them to show up and save the day. So back inside of our town, Agatha keeps giving Wanda more important information. She's like, according to the Book of the Damned, like you have more power than the Sorcerer Supreme. Like you're more powerful than Doctor Strange. You can do all these things without having to cast spells. Like you have no idea how powerful you are. And Wanda's like, I'm not a witch. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a witch. And in one of the key things that it's always been wondered, like, what does Wanda know what she's doing? Does she not what she's doing? Realize what she's doing? And how much of his self-delusion is someone else manipulating her? All those questions were kind of running out through the season. We kind of get answered to that where Agatha makes you go like, do you realize what you've been doing all this whole time? And she starts unlocking the minds of the whole town. And, Dottie walks up to her and is like, whatever you want, give me whatever plot line you want. Just, can you let my daughter out? Write whatever plot line for that as you want. But I just want my daughter out of the room. I just want to be able to hold her. Please let me do that. And then everyone in town is like, swarming her, talking about their horror stories, and start walking towards her. Cuts over to the twins, and they're watching it, and the one with brain powers has having all these visions of parents in danger, and they go like, we gotta go save the day, so they run on out. And then we have I wrote the wrong name down in my notes. And so then back to Wanda and in the city, and she's like clearly breaking down, and she's like, why are you making them say these things? Like, I'm not making them say these things. I freed them from what you did. And she clearly believes that she was keeping them safe. She had them at peace. And they're like, what are you talking about? We were dreaming your nightmares for this whole time. Like, we are in pain. We have no control. We're not seeing the people we care about. All we feel is pain this whole time. And you should conclude, like, she doesn't realize this. Like, she was so in her fantasy that she thought they were in the fantasy too, and had no idea what she was doing to people, even though she's been warned this entire time. And Vision in particular was yelling at her about it. She just believed what she wanted to believe so she could do whatever she wanted to do. And finally, so many people are yelling at her face about, like, no, stop, I'm in pain, please let me go. That, like, she starts screams, freaks out, and everyone is, like, in pain because of this. And she's like, oh, crap. Everything she does makes everything a little bit worse, and realizes, okay, I need to be the hero here. So she turns into both Pharaoh and Moses at the same time, decides to let the people go, shoots a beam up in the sky, and the hex opens up and says, people, run, escape, get out of here, run, run, run. And so they start running out. Hayward sees the beam open. He just wants to kill her. So he's like, military guys, let's load up and go get them. And all throughout this, our Visions have been fighting. Visions flying around the city, just punching each other. But that's kind of what I mentioned before about the action not being the best. The whole episode, they're punching each other, but it's not like a thing to talk about. They're just flying around a place, punching each other. And so then they're flying around, punching each other, and fake Vision gets punched, lands in the middle of the city, and because the portal is being torn open, he's being torn apart with it as this is happening. And you see him, like, looking past Wanda towards someone, and you look over and the kids too, they're being pulled apart by all of this. So she has to close up the universe, and Agatha's like, you realize what you've done here? You've maybe I'm saying this line a little bit early, but realize what you've done here. You've tied your little family to this universe. So either you have to save the people, save this universe, or you save your family, but you can't keep both of them, creating the tension that has kind of been there for the whole show. But really, the tension for the last half of this episode is that Wanda has to realize she has to let go of this. She can't hold on to this fantasy. It is broken. It does not work. It must end. And it's going to cost her everything that she wants to be the hero, be the person that she needs to be. And as they're doing this, the whole kind of, they have the shot from the picture they released of the family teaming up to battle all the forces pulling in around them. At this moment, White Vision pulls up, Hayward and his army pulls up, and so you've got a witch, a Vision, and an army all trying to battle this family, and each of them kind of picks a different one. The kids are going to battle the military, Vision will battle Vision, and the two witches are going to duke it out. So the Visions start just punching each other once again, and they end up in a building. And Vision realizes he's not going to win in a punching fight with this guy. He's got to talk him out of it. And evil Vision's like, my primary objective is to kill Vision. And fake Vision's like, but I'm not really Vision. I'm a conditional Vision. And you have this moment where White Vision like starts like, I need more information in this very Vision sorts of way. And it starts kind of this discussion to where fake Vision is like trying to use philosophy with him and reason with him. And turns into this existential discussion as to what Vision is, and at what point in time does Vision stop being Vision? Brings up the ship of Theseus, and two Visions pontificating back and forth between one another. Is White Vision realizes, my objective isn't to kill this guy because he does not meet my Vision parameters, and then fake Visions realize this guy has memory banks. Maybe they've been locked off. He's telling me he doesn't have the memories, but it's data. It's just right there. So he walks over with permission, opens up the mind of White Vision, and White Vision's eyes literally change inside of his head, and he remembers it all, and he says, I am Vision, and he just flies off. And I've watched the episode 2 times right now. Does it continue that? Do we get a post-credit scene? Did I miss something? Is there another additional piece with White Vision's what happened? When I first watched it, I was wondering, like, did he realize he's the Vision, therefore he self-destructed? Like, did I miss? Was I just watching it? Did I miss it? Watch the second. No, I am Vision. And he flies off, and we don't hear anything about him. So someone asked me yesterday, do you think we're done with Paul Bettany after this episode? I was like, I don't know. It's possible, but I wouldn't guess. I mean, I would assume we'll see him again in some form, in some way. White Vision, the other version, this alternate thing, flies off. So there's certainly, the door is open for more to happen there. So back in the town, the boys decide to fight the military, one of them, mind guy, freezes them. Speed guy runs and grabs their stuff, turns one of their hats around. And once again, kind of going into that stuff about where it just feels like there's more that you could have done, especially when you bring in Fox Universe Quicksilver that we saw do so many fun, cool things. We saw that character in this episode, and then you have these guys use quick speed and turn the hat around or something like that. Knock the hat off the guy. And that's not like, it's like, oh yeah, they use their powers. And that's as far as it goes. There wasn't something creative, clever, interesting, distinct, something that pops when you get the twins using their powers. It was just, yeah, they had a moment. They got to do a thing. That's it. And then Hayward sees them having their congratulatory moment, pulls out his gun. He's going to bust a cap and take them out. Monica shows up just in time with her ill-defined powers, at least as far as we know thus far. Steps in front of the bullets, and they like wobble through her and fall on the ground. And Hayward runs out of bullets. He's like, better get out of here. Runs. Monica has a moment with the twins where all of them are like, your powers are cool. No, your powers are cool. Hayward gets in his car, starts to drive off. Darcy returns after disappearing for 2 episodes. She smashes into him and captures him, says a quick little one-liner, and that's the last we see of her. I guess to say the other kind of odd things about this season, they didn't, I don't think they fully knew how to balance all their characters, and with the nature of the show, there's such a stark back and forth between the reality of inside the show versus outside the show as we're watching the show. And so some of these characters, it just, they didn't know what to do with Darcy for stretches of time. So she just disappeared and doesn't really have any resolution. So it just feels like we brought her in, made her kind of the star of one episode, and then she just kind of dwindled off by the time you get to the last 2 episodes. And she gets sucked into this world, but it seems like they just didn't know what to do with her. Because once she got sucked in, she drives in a car, she has a chat with Vision, and then she just shows up to run into the guy. But you could have done anything else there. Like that didn't need to be her. It was just, she was out there, and it created a little bit of a last minute surprise save moment. They're like, oh yeah, she's in a car and she finally showed up. Okay. But it just, when you bring a character in, you want there to have at least something a little bit more of consequence. Like Jimmy wasn't a major part of this episode, but he calls in the FBI and some other, like, it felt like he tied in a little bit more. But he kind of both of them. I mean, he didn't do nearly as much as you'd want, given that literally episodes dedicated to him, or an episode sort of dedicated to him. Where were we at? Back to Wanda and Agatha. Wanda has been flying around while all the action's happening on. She peers behind Agatha, does her mind trick, and takes her back to Salem. And the dead bodies stand up, turn into zombies like they're going to go after Agatha. And Agatha's doing her, oh, please don't, please have mercy. Because Wanda doesn't know how deceptive she actually is. And then Agatha being Agatha, the zombies turn and start going towards Wanda. And Agatha very quickly is like, your power isn't your issue, it's knowledge. I have all the knowledge, you have the power, and you just don't know what you're doing. And as she's saying all this, like the Scarlet Witch crown starts to like visualize on top of her head. And Agatha keeps making this promise, like, you give me your powers, I will give you the dream world that you can have, and do your deal if that's what you want. But she just keeps talking down to Wanda, is like, you just don't realize who you are and what you can do. So finally, Wanda has had enough of all of this. She goes, you want my power? You can take it. They fly outside out of the dream Salem world, and she just starts like hurling like mad her power bolts that Agatha's just absorbing them, and then Wanda's like turning into zombie version, but some of her throws are missing and hitting the hex. I wonder why that is happening. So she keeps throwing them, and Agatha is pumped about this, that she finally was able to snap this crazy person, and so she could steal all of her powers. And so she keeps absorbing until Wanda is all out, and she's kind of like, ugh. And Agatha, being a liar and a trickster, it's like, well, actually about that deal we made. Once a cast has been spell has been cast. It can never be changed. In this world you created, it's broken, just like you. Which is a fun little line and a way for her to say, I'm not going to help you out. And then she goes to use her magic powers, realizing nothing's happening. And Wanda reveals, ta-da! Want to know a trick? I cast runes while we were doing this, and you can't cast any spells. I've gotcha. And so then she just starts sucking all of Agatha's powers out of her. There's a kind of a lot going on in this moment. Like, I'm not sure exactly how the magic world works to explain the specifics of it and why Agatha was still flying when she couldn't pass spells, or if that was just a power. I don't know. I didn't quite fully understand all the specifics how this works, but Wanda suddenly knows how to pull powers out of her, and I'm not quite sure. She threw all of her powers out of her. What exactly meant? I'm not exactly sure exactly what was going on in this sequence. But she sucks out Agatha's powers, and in the middle of this, Agatha says,
you don't know what you've done.
Which we know multiverse stuff is coming. And we thought it would be a little bit more, or at least some of us thought it would be a bit more overtly stated in this show exactly what Wanda did and breaking multiverse and stuff like that. Seemed like it was going to be more overt in the show, but it seems that's not the case anymore with what we've seen it, that it's a little bit more subtle. That it's hinted at something very bad has happened because of what Wanda has done, but we're not told what it is. So Agatha falls down to the ground. Wanda's taken all of her powers, and Agatha's like, keeps warning her about what's going on. She's like, for what's coming, you're going to need my help. And she's like, well, I know where you are, and you're going to be trapped here as the character you chose, the nosy neighbor, boop, and converts her back into 1950s Agnes, and sends her off on her way. Kind of leads us into the final stretch of the show as it tries to close everything out. And the field starts to close inward. And Wanda and Vision have to go back to their little home, sitcom home, and put the kids to bed and say that we're really proud of you. And she's like, I'm so glad that you guys picked me to be your mom. And then they have to leave them. And it's kind of an interesting one because it's sort of like her kids die, but then it's also, as you watch all of this, it's the realization that it was just a dream that had been given physical form, that they weren't real. So it's like an interesting scenario to where you feel the loss. In another sense, you're like, I don't really know what they were, but I know she loved them and cared about them, and that was her dream for them to exist. And that's why they did exist, because it was her dream. And so you realize the dream has to come to an end to save the other people around them. As they go downstairs, and Vision has a nice romantic moment where clearly he loves her. And they have a final little philosophical moment where they're discussing what is he, and he's the remnants of the Mind Stone within her, and he is the one that she loves. And then finally closes in on them. He disappears, the house disappears, and we're left with the empty plot of land that she showed up at. And she walks back into town, and all the people are kind of angry looking at her that they know what she's done. And then you have Monica, who's, they'll never know what you sacrificed in order to save them. And that's true, but the flip of that is they were in danger because of you chose to create the scenario where you had to sacrifice something. You had already lost Vision. You decided to recreate. So you can't, it's not entirely fully fair argument, Monica. You're being far too sympathetic towards someone that was torturing people. Just because you understand why she did it doesn't mean that it wasn't a really, really bad thing to do. It was a bad thing for her to do. And Wanda's like, they'll still never understand me, but you do. And Monica's like, I would bring my mom back if I could. So you get why she understands where Wanda's coming from. But I think the side to it where I think there's maybe the show needed to define its morality a little bit. It heavily makes the point Hayward is a bad dude. But in a lot of ways, Hayward isn't really wrong at all. He does some bad things. He does some things that are illegal. He does some things he shouldn't have done. In another sense, Wanda took a witch, took a whole city hostage, and was torturing them for a week. she was the bad guy that needed to be stopped. Now we have information and like we can sympathize with her. She's a point of view character, obviously the lead of the show. So like we're supposed to root for her in that sense, but she was the villain to all those people. And government agent guy with technology to stop threats to groups of people, he was doing his job and he was doing something that was morally right. He did some morally wrong things in the process and violating Vision's will, but there's a sense to what he was doing that was right. And the show doesn't seem to acknowledge the certain rightness to it. And at the same time, Monica being able to understand why Wanda would do this seems to be sympathizing so much with Wanda's pain without having any sympathy for all of the people that were being tortured. So like there's a little bit of an imbalance in the way the show dealt with some of its higher level implications of what is going on. And you want to have people clearly being good and bad, where it's a show inherently that almost everyone exists in the gray. That's kind of what makes the show interesting, is everyone exists in the gray, that even, one of our main villains, Hayward, is doing something that's actually a good thing. He's trying to save a city of people. He survived through the blip and saw the apocalypse and wanted a weapon to be able to stop future apocalypses. That's not a bad, unreasonable thing. He doesn't have superpowers. He wants to stand up for the non-superpower people. And so the show existed in this world where there was a lot of gray, but it didn't have enough time to explore some of that stuff as much as I wish that it had touched on some of that stuff. So Wanda says, I don't understand these powers, but I will. And then she flies off and turns into her outfit and flies off, and the series ends. Almost ends. We've got 2 post-credit scenes here. Post-credit scene number 1, Jimmy is kind of cleaning up everything and running the FBI investigation. You guys over there, you guys investigate that, look into that. And so you have a final little moment between Monica and Jimmy. It's kind of nice to have a little close off. Darcy's not even there. She doesn't like these sorts of things, so she just took off, which once again feels like their character was kind of a big deal for like 3 episodes, and then she kind of disappeared off the show. Just a little cameo appearance to be like, remember, she does exist. And I think that's where you can see some of the issues in the structure, the writing of the shows. There's some of that stuff that should have been tightened up a little bit of. That's probably not the best way to send off one of your characters, is to have her disappear for the last couple episodes and just make one little cameo appearance and be gone. So I have a little moment, and then someone says, hey, we need to talk to you inside the theater. She goes inside the theater, and that was a ruse. In fact, this is a scroll, and it says, a friend of your mother sent me that we want to talk to you. We heard you were grounded, and we want to see you up there, up in the space. So she's getting taken up into space, I'm assuming, setting up for Captain Marvel 2. Fun little... Okay, I'm actually wearing a Captain Marvel shirt, if you didn't know. Fun little moment. Then we get our next post-credit scene. Off in the middle of nowhere, camera flies through this beautiful scenery to a little cabin where Wanda is sitting outside looking sad. Then you hear a teapot whistle. She stands up, walks back inside to get her tea. And then the camera keeps moving into the other room. And the Scarlet Witch is sitting there in trance mode, reading the Book of the Damned while ominous music plays. And once again, you have someone that is trying to learn what their powers are, realizing she's much more powerful than she realized. Even she's more powerful than she realized before she had the Infinity Stone, and now it's amplified because of that. And other witches think that she's something super duper duper special, and by comparison, she's way more powerful than Doctor Strange. Okay, then. And so now she's learning about what all this means. And I don't know how much you read into it, that Wanda's living like Wanda in front of the cabin, and Scarlet Witch is separate from her doing all the reading. But there's certainly seems to be implications of a certain splitness to her. And you've seen that all along of when she's in, she has a very normal, friendly side, and then she goes into rage mode and she's a different person. And then you see this here, sad person drinking tea, scary witch lady reading the Book of the Damned about probably some potentially very dangerous stuff. And if she's still wanting to bring her family back, that can mean a lot of things. And so then the final thing that happens is that you hear the voice of her kids, Mom, help, please, Mom, help, as she's sitting there implying the kids are in danger. And so they still in some sense exist in some realm in some way. And she's learning about super duper duper dark evil magic. How do we get multiverse? Well, we've had a lot of pieces put in place to set a bunch of that stuff up. So what are my final kind of closing thoughts on WandaVision, the episode, and everything like that? It was a very, like I said, fun experience watching all of it. I enjoyed the show. I loved that it was so different, wild, crazy, zany. I think they shot themselves in the foot with some of the misdirects that they went with a show that was intentionally supposed to be building intrigue, and they set up some expectations that they couldn't live up to because of that, because it's never what their show was going to be about. And if you tease that your show is one thing, like fan service, the TV show, and then it's not that, you teased that, you set that expectation. And then likewise, as I mentioned kind of throughout this, there's a few writing issues in there to where I think structurally there's some issues with characters kind of disappearing a little bit, not fully exploring some of the ideas that were present. Hayward is this big gigantic villain because he doesn't want a witch to take a city hostage. Like, that doesn't fully add up. And so there's a few writing quirks here and there, but in general, a really neat addition to the MCU that broke their normal formula, brought in some wild, crazy ideas, and once you figured out what was going on, once it was in its groove, when I had proper expectations, that's maybe a way to phrase it. I didn't know what to expect the first 3 episodes, so I was confused. Episode 4 gave me context, so I got really invested in the show. But there were some things they teased, some things they said in interviews that created a wrong expectation. So then there were a couple episodes that didn't quite live up to that so much. And then when I had proper expectations again, had a lot of fun with it. And then I guess the other issue I think is in the structure of it, that Wanda and Vision are separated as soon as the Halloween episode started. And so then you have 3 episodes where it's all them together. Episode 4, they're, in the background of the episode. Episode 5, they're together, but they're fighting, and then they split up for 3 episodes. And then they come back for the last one. And it just felt like as soon as we knew what was going on, it would have been nice to see more of the characters together. And there's some odd things, like they did a Modern Family episode where the family are in 2 different places. Vision wasn't with the family. And then they did Office references in that one. They showed that Vision has an office and he doesn't go to the office. That's kind of a bit odd, strange decision. So it's one of those ones that had a lot of greatness, and there was made certain mistakes that was like, I don't know what you could have done to balance that out in light of the decade thing that they were doing, and then likewise where the story was progressing. I get there's some difficulties to it, but the few pieces that didn't quite fit right. But so it's been fun. I look very much forward to Falcon and the Winter Soldier starting in a couple weeks, and seeing what all they're doing in Phase 4 with all this new content that they're cranking out. It's been cool to finally have MCU stuff again after sitting out the year 2020. Let me know what you thought down below in the comments section. Remember, there is a companion video to this with 25 more minutes of me talking about the season as a whole. And keep talking movies and TV too much.